what I argue is that while it has perhaps a legal significance and a political significance, because people talk about it all the time, it does not demarcate geographically compact, ethnically homogeneous, and economically independent geopolitical units. It's simply imaginary to think that the West Bank exists as a kind of a separate and compact geopolitical unit, or Gaza or Israel. We already have a single country. And I would agree with that. But when we talk about interdependence of processes, it doesn't mean that everything is harmonious and wonderful. Far from it. It is a country where you have two groups, to simplify things, Israeli Jews and Palestinians, but they live in conditions of radical inequality, where everything that you can do or not do is determined by whether the state considers you a member of the privileged group or not. So, if you're an Israeli Jew, you can live anywhere you want in the West Bank. You can carry an Uzi submachine gun. The government will give it to you. You can go on your own special highways. You can go right through checkpoints. Just the other day, a group of settlers marched through the checkpoints into the heart of Jericho in order to, they say, to reestablish a settlement there. I thought maybe they have special magical powers that allow them to go through Israeli checkpoints, because when Palestinians try it, they get shot. Sometimes they get shot for much less than that. So whether you'll be given land, given a job, given all sorts of government supports, is entirely determined by your belonging in the dominant ethnic group or not. Now, if it would be very simple if Israel said, you know, the people in Gaza, they have the wrong skin color, and that's why we don't want them to come back to their homes. Nobody would argue. None of these members of parliament would be passing resolutions saying this isn't apartheid. They might be first in line to condemn it. What's the difference? It's not voluntary. You know, being born Palestinian or being born an Israeli Jew isn't more voluntary than being born with brown eyes or green eyes, or being born with black skin or brown skin or white skin. This is why it is unarguably apartheid. This is why it is apartheid. They try to mystify it with all sorts of claims about a Jewish heritage that gives them the right to do this. But Palestinians were Jews as well. There were always Jews living in Palestine. Palestinians never had a problem living with Jews. The problem is the claim of exclusivity of a community that came primarily from Europe to settle a country that already had a people in it. You remember that a few years ago, the so-called international community, which means the Western powers, supported the partition of Serbia. They said the people of Kosovo, who are 90% of Albanian ethnicity, are oppressed, and therefore Serbia must be partitioned. And it was clear that whatever you think about the issue, whatever you think about Serbia, this was a totally illegal partition imposed from the outside by NATO. But they said this is necessary, this is important, and we have to do it because these ethnic groups can't get along. When you take Serbia together, the proportion of the population that was ethnic Albanian was 20% before the partition. If you were to have a partition of Palestine, a repartition along the 1967 border, the non-Jewish population of Israel after the partition would still be 20%. So do you follow? I don't know if that's confusing or if you follow what I'm saying. In other words, the result would be as bad as the starting point in Serbia that they thought was the problem. Where I think the comparison is so apt for us now, and you have to always be very careful making comparisons, is that to the end of the apartheid struggle, even after the uprisings of 1985-86, the South African regime was never really threatened in any physical way. They had the weapons, in large part thanks to Israel. As The Economist magazine noted in 1986, so far there is no real physical threat to white power. So far there is little threat to white lives. The white state is mighty and well equipped. It has the capacity to repress the township revolts far more bloodily. The blacks have virtually no urban or rural guerrilla capacity, practically no guns, few safe havens within South Africa or without. This was a few years before the end of the regime. This balance of power never changed. And a similar equation could be written today about the relative power of a massively armed and much more ruthless Israeli state. And we saw what they can do with those weapons against civilians and really against the foundations of civilized life in Gaza last year and in Lebanon before that. On the one hand, a heavily armed Israel, and on the other hand, lightly armed Palestinian resistance factions who, no matter how skilled they get, even if they were to reach the level of being able to fight the Israeli army as Hezbollah in Lebanon, who have created an effective deterrent against Israeli invasions, that balance of power is still unlikely to change very significantly. What did change for South Africa, and what all the weapons in the world were not able to prevent, was the complete loss of legitimacy of the apartheid regime and its practices. Once this legitimacy was gone, whites lost the will to maintain a system that relied almost entirely on repression and violence to maintain control. And what we see now is a similar shift, where Palestinians are gaining moral and political legitimacy and Israel is losing it. This is why they have to mobilize all these people to pass these resolutions. But a resolution passed in the Ontario Provincial Parliament that says that the State of Israel respects human rights and the rule of law doesn't make it so. And resolutions that say that Israeli Apartheid Week is a form of hate speech instead of a movement for justice and equality doesn't make it so. And I don't think it will intimidate and demobilize the growing numbers of people, especially young people, who are committed to this movement. There will come a time when the people who passed and supported these resolutions will claim they never did so. And they will say, we were always against Israeli apartheid, just like we were always against apartheid in South Africa. Thank you very much.